The longer I've been at this job, the more I care about being happy. Don't get me wrong, I love what we do. Being able to talk to you all every week has afforded me a life and experiences that I wouldn't trade for anything. But like anything you do in life, it can become a grind. Christy and I have faced a lot of personal struggles in the past year, and there's nothing like really going through it to set you straight on what's important. We've had some pretty serious talks, and you know what? We decided to focus more on how we want to live and less on making sure that every decision we make is in service of this channel. And I owe quite a bit of this epiphany to Bang & Olufsen. Over the decades, I have followed the brand obsessively, becoming not just an admirer, but a customer. That is, whenever my finances allowed. This past January, that journey came full circle when I had the chance to review the Bang & Olufsen BEOLAB 90, a speaker I consider unmatched in both vision and performance. And when that review was finished, we looked at all of the boxes and gear and equipment that had collected around our house, and we knew there needed to be a change. While living with the 90s was an experience that I will never forget, I wanted to experience something that felt a little more at home in our space, which leads us to where we are today with the BEOLAB 50s. The 50s, if you can believe it, are now 8 years old, yet still look boldly futuristic, especially in a world where hi-fi is like hyper-fixated on nostalgia. And I get it. For many of you, it's hard to let go of the traditional hi-fi experience. Audiophiles always ask, what if? Especially when it comes to active speakers. What if the app stops working? What if a connector becomes obsolete? What if something fails? And all of these are very legitimate questions that no company, not even one with a century's worth of history like Bang & Olufsen, can anticipate every scenario. But the BEOLAB 50 has already shown it can stand the test of time. 8 years later, it still works with just about everything. There is a broad range of connections, including analog RCA, optical and SPDIF digital connections, dual USB inputs, B&O's digital power link, as well as Ethernet. Now, where the 50s start to show their age is in their lack of wireless connectivity, which you'll see in B&O's more recent products like the BEOLAB 28s and 8s. However, the 50s do support wireless power link as well as WISA. Now, you can, modernize the 50s with the BeoConnect core, which lets you add things like AirPlay, Bluetooth, high-res audio streaming, and better app functionality. Plus, the core brings HDMI ARC support to the party. For those of you not super familiar with Bang & Olufsen speakers, I'll keep this part brief. The BEOLAB 50 is an active design, so all of its amplification, input switching, and control are built into the speaker. All you need is a source, whether that's your phone, a CD player, a turntable with a phono preamp, or a streamer. The speaker handles the rest with no bulky electronics or system matching required. And inside each cabinet are 7 drivers, a 3/4-inch tweeter, 3 4-inch mid-range drivers, and 3 10-inch woofers, each powered by their own 300-watt ICE power amplifier. That's 2,100 watts of total power per speaker, good for a frequency response of about 15 hertz to 43 kilohertz. Like the flagship BEOLAB 90, the 50 is a true full-range loudspeaker capable of reproducing virtually any note or sound effect without the need for a subwoofer. Like most high-end loudspeakers, purchasing a pair of 50s is done at the dealer level, where you have the opportunity to specify the speaker's finish top to bottom. This includes selecting everything from the color of the metal exterior to the fabric that adorns the frame. With the recent launch of the Bang & Olufsen Atelier program, there are literally hundreds of color, fabric, and material combinations to choose from. This also means that you can change the entire look of your speaker years down the road if you want, which adds to the timelessness of their design. Now, call me a B&O purist, but I went for the classic natural aluminum and black the brand has been known for years. And it took about 2 months for them to arrive from Denmark, where they were then hand-delivered and installed by Watt Integration. Before the install team even arrived, we discussed some other improvements, going back to what I mentioned earlier in the video, that would make how we want to live in this house a whole lot easier. So we decided to do a whole home wiring retrofit covering network, security, automation, video distribution, and future Bang & Olufsen expansion. Our home had no internal data infrastructure, so we opened up all the walls to run the necessary network and power link cables for the 50s to work as both a stereo pair as well as a left and right main channel in a multi-channel home theater system. This let me add the BEOLAB 8s as rears and the BeoSound Theater as an Atmos-enabled center speaker to the 50s for a complete Bang & Olufsen home theater. Now, unlike speakers that you might purchase online or buy at retail, setup really isn't your problem, as everything, including placement, room tuning, and the speaker's final voicing is handled by your B&O install team with your input, of course. Once all the retrofit work was done, installing the 50s took about 3 hours, give or take. We had the speakers placed on the sides of our TV with all of the cables, our Apple TV, and the BeoConnect core recessed into the wall inside what's called a strong box to keep all of the clutter hidden and tidy. Talk about a life hack. If you're wondering, the speakers seen here are set about 10 feet or just over 3 meters apart, with roughly 4 feet or a little over a meter of breathing room between each speaker and our side walls, plus about 18 inches or 46 centimeters of clearance behind them. From our sofa, which is about 12 feet back, the BEOLAB 50s reached all the way down below 20 hertz. In fact, they nailed 20 hertz at volumes well above what I'd normally use for testing. After running their active room compensation, which is a calibration the installer handles with a custom microphone, the 50s sounded shockingly neutral across the entire range. And like with the BEOLAB 90, I was able to drop in my own PEQ filters onto the 50s, which gave me even more control over their sound. Now, that's not something that most people will probably ever need to mess with, but it is a cool feature that really shows how flexible these speakers are. And speaking of flexibility, I paired the 50s first with the BeoConnect core and then later with the BeoSound Theater. This let me control everything. Things like streaming, making adjustments, even day-to-day listening, right from the B&O app. Now, before I lived with these speakers, I assumed the 50s would basically be just smaller versions of the 90s. I mean, that's how most speaker lines usually go. But they're not. While the two share some tech and even some sonic DNA, they sound nothing alike. The 90s can be tuned to mimic aspects of the 50, but the reverse isn't really possible. And that's not a knock, it's just a matter of their very different designs. With the 90s, you can dial in almost any kind of soundstage you want, from wide and enveloping to pinpoint precise. The 50s, by contrast, they're just more focused, dynamic, and contrasty, even in their wide mode. And honestly, that is perfectly fine by me. The very first afternoon, Christy and I sat down with the 50s. I'm talking no installers, no distractions. She looked at me and said, "Are these actually better than the 90s?" And depending on what kind of listener you are or the kind of sound you love, they very well could be. Now, the 90s are dramatic enough just sitting there, but that's not to say that the 50s don't have a little drama up their sleeve. When you power them up, the 50s top-mounted tweeter slowly rises as the music fades in, stopping right at your preset volume level, which you control inside the app. It's like watching a conductor call for a tuning note just before the concert begins. And that tweeter fires upward into a disc-shaped lens, a trick B&O first used on the iconic BEOLAB 5. Surrounding it are curtains that open and close to adjust directivity. Wide mode gives you a more ambient, spacious presentation, while the narrow mode locks things in with sharper focus. Now, I'm sure there's a lot more DSP wizardry happening behind the scenes with all of those drivers to achieve the different sound between the two modes, but the only thing you actually see are those little acoustic curtains moving. And no matter which mode you choose, narrow or wide, the BEOLAB 50's top end is always light, airy, and beautifully extended. In the narrow setting, you'll notice the highs become more directional. This adds extra focus to instruments and vocals, making them easier to locate in the soundstage. And while the 50 can easily reach frequencies far beyond what you or I can hear, it never overdoes it. Like every B&O speaker I have spent time with, it strikes a very smart balance between extension, your room's acoustics, and long-term listening comfort. Think of it as having the same kind of sparkle of, say, the Wilson Watt Puppy, but always completely under control. So no matter how loud you play, it never turns harsh or fatiguing. What's really impressive about the BEOLAB 50 is how engaging they are at low volumes, especially in the highs. Many traditional speakers need to be cranked up before they, come alive. And even ones that don't. For example, Bowers and Wilkins speakers, which can sound lively at lower volumes thanks to their boosted treble, that same bump in treble can get fatiguing when the volume climbs. The 50s can pull off that same sense of clarity without any tricks in the treble. They stay articulate and easy to follow, never tipping into brightness territory, which means you can enjoy them just as much at background levels as you can when you're pushing them to the point of probably getting a noise complaint. The mid-range on the BEOLAB 50 changes depending on whether you set it to wide or narrow. The speaker always stays neutral and balanced, maybe even more so than the 90s, but the sense of presence shifts. In narrow mode, vocals and instruments feel close and physical, like the singer is right in front of you. Play something from Fiona Apple or maybe Alanis Morissette's MTV Unplugged, and it feels like they are only a few feet away, but they never sound harsh or overbearing. Now switch over to the wide mode, and that front row feeling, well, that's going to move back about 10 rows, giving you a completely different perspective on the exact same music. It's a pretty clever trick that allows you to enjoy your favorite albums in multiple ways, each with its own very unique mood and impact. And then there's the bass, the foundation of any speaker. Now, in our room, the BEOLAB 90s set the benchmark, delivering low end with ease and authority, and I have been chasing that standard ever since. The BEOLAB 50 can't quite match the 90s raw power or finesse note for note, but with real-world music in movies, not just bass test tracks, it comes surprisingly close. And for me, that trade-off in its size, and let's be real, price, makes the 50 more than worth it. In fact, its low end easily outperformed the SVS SB17 and Titan combo, the Arundel Tower 8s, and the Watt Puppies, and even the B&W 800 signatures. Like the highs and the mids, the bass changes slightly depending on whether the 50s are in their wide or narrow mode. And for the low end, I always preferred narrow. The kick drum in Floor Tom and Collective Soul's December sounded so real, I don't think I have ever heard it sound better. And I've been playing that damn track for 25 years. The hits had real punch and depth, but what impressed me most was how natural the decay was, the way each note fades and then blends up into the low mid bass. Outside of the BEOLAB 90, I've never heard bass this three-dimensional and controlled from a speaker without a subwoofer. The Watt Puppy comes close, but the 50, they have just a bit more depth, texture, and air that makes everything from the bass on up sit more naturally in a room. And let's talk about space for a minute. When it comes to soundstage, very few speakers truly disappear the way Bang & Olufsen's do, and the 50s are no exception. Aside from ultra high-end stuff from, say, Wilson, B&W, MBL, Focal, and Sonus Faber, nothing I've heard vanishes quite like this. And if you're a soundstage nerd like me, I'd even say the 50s surpass the 90s when it comes to pinpoint focus and placement. Every instrument, every voice just pops with just more contrast than I remember getting from the 90s. Now scale, that's another story. The 90s still win when it comes to sheer size. I'm talking width, height, even that near 360-degree sound field. But the 50s get remarkably close. Case in point, I was listening to Do It Again EP from Royksop and Robin, and holy smokes, the room completely disappeared. The stage was so big that I actually stopped to check and see if the BEOLAB 8s in the rear of the room had somehow kicked on. They hadn't, but I still had to double check. Before I wrap up, I have to mention the 50s as left and right mains in a home theater setup, with the theater up front and a pair of 8s as surrounds. Now, when I first reviewed the theater 2 years ago, it was as a standalone soundbar. But this time around, I honestly believe the theater might be the most important speaker B&O has ever made. It is far more versatile than I originally gave it credit for. If you're considering building a high-end home theater or a whole home B&O setup, this is where I'd start. Paired with other B&O speakers, even older ones using PowerLink, it doesn't just work as a speaker. It also acts as a preamp processor, and it's that second role that makes it just invaluable. As a center speaker between a pair of 50s, the theater is crystal clear and super direct, perfect for dialogue, even without voice enhancements turned on. But what really makes it special is the theater's True Image upmixer. Basically, it can take any signal, stereo or multi-channel, and spread it across however many B&O speakers you've got, and in a way that feels natural and seamless. While we have used more loudspeakers when testing home theater products, this 5-speaker B&O home theater surround sound performance was simply more impressive than our usual 5.1.4 Atmos rig. Watching Matthew McConaughey's film about the Paradise Fire, the Lost Bus, and Dolby Atmos with True Image engaged was just intensely visceral, not to mention a completely seamless auditory experience that very few systems have been able to pull off. And True Image isn't room correction, though B&O speakers have that too. It's smart processing that blends everything together across your entire system, regardless of how many speakers you have or where they're placed, just so long as they're within range of the setup microphone. The theater made the whole home theater experience better. I was able to set up the 5 speakers in our living room 4 completely different ways, even accounting for spots like when I'm sitting in the living room or over in the kitchen. And switching between these setups, dead simple. I could do it right from the app or my Halo remote in seconds. No complicated menus, no endless tweaking. Just try something, see if I like it, and if I don't, delete it and move on. In a weird way, the theater ended up being just as impactful as the 50s themselves. You just don't realize how powerful it is until you start piecing together a bigger, more complicated B&O focused system. And it's this kind of flexibility and performance that you would expect from something like a BEOLAB 50. I mean, it is a premium product, and over the past 8 years, it has only become more premium in price. So no, I don't expect anyone to just run out and buy a pair of these on a whim. This isn't that kind of purchase. The 50 is an investment. And while some may view purchases like this as chasing some sort of status symbol, for me, it's an investment in myself and what I value. Because at the end of the day, no one else will fully understand why a product like this matters to you the way you do. Sure, friends and family will enjoy listening to music or watching movies on the BEOLAB 50s, and they're built so well you could probably pass them down one day. Just don't expect anyone else to fully understand why you want them. And that's okay, or at least it should be. Of course, there's always going to be some hero out there who will tell you how you should have spent your money, but ignore that person. These kinds of products aren't about practicality or sensibility. They're about a feeling and emotion. They're personal. If they make you smile and reconnect with your younger self, or spark a memory you don't want to let go of, and maybe even give others a taste of that same joy, then the price starts to matter a whole lot less. At least that's how it was for me.